Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for registering for our Retail Restart webinar. I'm Delek Knight from the Economic Development team, and my team is very pleased to be presenting this webinar to you today. Obviously, the COVID crisis has placed an unprecedented strain on retail and our shopping precincts currently, and there is much uncertainty as to how and even if retail will survive. Data and information can always provide an insight and a way forward. So today we've asked a local resident and business owner, Justin Ganly, to provide you with some valuable insights that we hope may assist you in your business. Justin's worked with Bernard Salt for over a decade, consults in the retail sector, has clients that include Aldi, Costco, Spotlight, Dusk, 7-Eleven, and he's incredibly passionate about relaunching retail in Stonnington, and he has some really valuable insights to share to you today. I'm really pleased to be handing over to Justin so he can get started. Thank you all for waiting.
Thanks for the kind intro, Delek, and good morning to everyone. The format of this morning will be, I've got a presentation that I'm going to run through for about half an hour or so. I'd appreciate while I'm doing that if you can turn your videos off and mute as well, so that there aren't any interruptions. Along the way, please feel free to use Zoom to send any questions you'd like me to address. And then after my presentation, I'll do that and open the floor up generally for any questions that you may have. The intent is very much to get this done neatly within the hour and let you get back to your business at 11 o'clock. So let me make a start and get the presentation working, which is always useful. So just in terms of intro, Delek stole a little bit of my thunder there, but my business, Deep End Services, I founded 17 years ago. Previously, I'd worked for a decade with Bernard Salt. You may know Bernard through his work in the media. He's Australia's best known business demographer, ex-KPMG partner, and very much a futurist. I left Bernard, struck out on my own to form my own firm, which is now 12 of us based in Melbourne, working throughout the country, throughout New Zealand, Asia, and indeed beyond. And our work is all for our clients in determining where their businesses should be located. We started out in retail, and that's morphed into the full range of industries that have a need for a location. Delek touched on some of our clients, and there are some of them well-known names, large format down to very small formats as well. As Delek said, I'm a Melbourne resident. Lived in Stonnington for 12 years now. My office is in Claremont Street in South Yarra. 2 kids at local schools, and I can assure you that we are very supportive of local businesses as I look at my credit card statements every month. I wanted to first just touch on some results from a recent survey that we carried out with the Glenferrie Road Melbourne Business Association, just to give you an understanding of what's going on in your world at the moment. The first was I wanted to understand how the local businesses there had traded in 2019, so pre-COVID compared to 18, and just 44% of them had increased sales in 19 compared to 18. I think it just underlines the fact that many of you were doing it tough before this happened. And then you can see by comparing sales in April of this year, when the COVID crisis was at its peak, how things turned down so severely. Just 6% of businesses had sales that were up. We asked the survey participants to tell us what the impact had been. 21% were closed at that time, and 44% said that they'd experienced a major impact. So 2/3 were either closed or have experienced a major impact. And so I do feel your pain, understand what you have been going through, and to a degree what some of you are still going through. 81% of those who were clear at that stage were on JobKeeper or had staff on JobKeeper, and 81% and 88% had sought rent relief. I also just want to understand how the businesses were operating. 86%, for instance, have a website. That's not a bad measure. Frankly, these days I'm still somewhat concerned with businesses that don't have their own website. And the fact is that 14% in that precinct still don't have their own website. 39% were not offering any the ability to order online and either have the goods delivered, click and collect, and or delivered through a third party, such as Uber Eats, for instance. 39%, quite high. Just 41% have a loyalty program, but 89% have a database, and I see a disconnect there. 50% of businesses only offering one or more buy now, pay later type services. I understand there's a cost associated with those, but in some of the sectors today, if you're not offering those, frankly, again, you're not in the game. 2/3 offering deals or discounts to other businesses, which is great, but less than half offering deals or discounts for schools and groups. And one of the themes I'm going to be talking about today are the importance, and particularly within Stonnington, of children and children of all ages to your businesses today and into the future. Just a couple of slides on the economy. I'm an economist, but I'm not going to bore you with lots of very dry details. But what you do need to understand is what the Reserve Bank, the RBA, is thinking. And what they are thinking is that everything changed between February and May. So at February, they thought that the economy would continue to grow in very much the manner that it had been over the previous 5 years or so. What then happened was we had the COVID crisis. We still have the COVID crisis, and in Victoria in particular. They then delivered what they believe would be the 3 scenarios to fit how our economy would look over the next 3 years. And the important point to note here is even in the best case scenario, the size of the economy, this is the easiest way to think about it, in 2 years' time, will still be smaller, even in the best case scenario, than where the bank thought it would be pre-COVID. In the worst case scenario, the economy is still smaller in 2 years' time than it was pre-COVID. So that's what we're all facing. We're facing having to do business within an economy which is going to be smaller for some time as a result of the COVID crisis. But if there's some upside, it's that unemployment is perhaps not going to be as bad as the RBA had thought. They thought that unemployment would reach 10% quite quickly. Treasury is now saying they think 8% will be the peak of unemployment. Now, of course, there's a lot going on out there. JobKeeper, to a degree, is an artificial measure, which is keeping people off unemployment. I think it's a tremendous measure generally. There is some tweaking undoubtedly that's about to happen to the scheme. And I think that there is no doubt that it will be extended for some sectors, tourism, for instance, being one of the more obvious ones. So in terms of retail and services, what's going on and what is the outlook? The ANZ is releasing the best data at the moment, and they're releasing it in a very timely fashion. So the data in this chart goes back to December last year and through to just over a week ago. Each bar on this chart represents 1 day. So it's 1 day this year compared to 1 day, the same day last year. And what it shows is pre-COVID, so back in February, if you just look at the black line as a start, that spending on all goods and services was growing at a rate across the country of about 5%. That's what the black line shows. And then we had the COVID crisis start. And then things turned negative initially, and then we had our panic buying phase here. And you can see from the orange bar the groceries impact of panic buying. You can see though that groceries have been strong throughout this whole period. What has been weak throughout this whole period, and I know I've got one or a couple travel agents potentially in the webinar this morning, your sector has been particularly hard hit, and you can see at the bottom here how the spending on the travel sector has just fallen through the floor. In fact, what travel agents are obviously having to do and airlines having to do is refund monies which had been paid out for trips which have not been taken. So travel remains a large net detractor from spending. Groceries remain strong, and what we have seen is the emergence of what is being called here shopping. Now I'll go into more detail exactly what shopping is in a second. But the other big negatives throughout this period have been services. So these are things like gyms, hairdressing and the like, and also dining and takeaway. You can see that they have been negatives throughout this time. This is a retail only view. So it takes groceries and it takes what was called retail spending on that previous slide and provides more details. Again, you can see food retail here, you can see dining and takeaway. What you can see also though with more clarity here is, for instance, fashion. And you can see how fashion has been strongly negative throughout this time. It's still negative, it's almost back into positive territory, but gee, it's been hard work. And again, anyone in fashion, I feel for you. Things are turning, but it's been a very tough 3 or 4 months. Department stores, I'm not going to talk in about a great deal of detail, but it's fair to say that department stores' growth has been in the discount part of the sector. So Kmart and Big W have been very strong during this time, but not so Myer and David Jones, whose operations were actually closed for a long time. The surprisingly strong one has been household goods, which are these green bars through here. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail shortly. This chart shows retail and comparing total retail across the main states, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. And you can see in here, both back in late March and early April and since May, the effect of being in Victoria, where our lockdown has been harsher and has been held for longer. And now clearly, given what happened on Saturday, which has been very unfortunate for sectors such as cafes, restaurants and pubs, it's likely that we will, in Victoria, remain behind the rest of the country. Now that's going to create some pain, certainly in the short term, but if there's any message for you is that it will come back, and the experience from the smaller states of Western Australia, South Australia in particular, has been that those states are now very strongly positive. So I showed you this chart, they're actually in positive 10% territory. The issue I know for you is that we've got to get to that point, and it does look like it is still some way away within Victoria. If I turn to Stonnington, I think about one of the key drivers in Stonnington. It's dining and it's cafes and restaurants and it's takeaway food. And you can see the effect of the tighter restrictions in Victoria for these categories in particular, compared to spending changes in New South Wales and Queensland. And whilst we would have thought if numbers had been increased as they were going to be on Monday, that we would have seen Victoria getting closer to the other states, there's no doubt that this will now be going sideways until restrictions on venue numbers get lifted above 20, for instance. There are some of you that may be involved in the specialty food sector, and the message here is you're sitting within what's called other food retail. So I'm talking here about people who might have patisserie, bakery, fruit and vegetable type offerings. The good news is that spending at those types of venues has actually been remarkably strong during this period. Has been tracking a bit below supermarkets, but now is starting to get closer to what supermarkets are actually achieving. And that's certainly good news for people who are involved in that part of retail. I talked about household goods being remarkably strong during this time. Probably the one that's surprised me the most more recently has been furniture. And you can see how strongly positive furniture has been over the last month in particular. Hardware's been strong throughout. Bunnings has done very well during this period. Even Mitre 10 has as well. Homewares and office. So home offices have been a very strong driver during this time, and in my opinion, will continue to be for some time. So people with businesses like mine, we've been working from home now for 3 months. We're told on Saturday that any thoughts we may have had that we're going to be returning back to our workplaces from July had been put back by at least a month. It's my opinion that may well be longer. I think that spending that's happening in homes as a result of people now realising that they have been at home now for months and are likely to be home for longer. I think we're going to continue to see these categories in particular being supported by the fact that people are now, if they're working as I am at the moment on a laptop, but I'm about to bite the bullet and go and buy a big screen setup because I can now see that I'm going to need to save my eyes. Those sorts of things are driving spending, and they are driving spending within precincts such as those in Stonnington. So all the bits and pieces that go on your desk lamps, pieces of stationery, these sorts of things are the sorts of things that people are going to want to come into your businesses and buy, because they're not working in the city now. They're not working in offices in the suburbs. They're working at home, and they're working at home in locations in and around you. There's some other sectors that have done surprisingly well. Things like bookshops and toys and hobbies as well. Consumer electronics has been remarkably strong, and the big chains have prospered there, the JB Hi-Fis, the Good Guys and Harvey Norman, but also smaller stores offering electrical goods, particularly those associated with home offices, are continuing to do very well. These are the categories that need help, and I touched on clothing earlier. Jewellery is only just back into positive territory. Beauty is probably a little bit different. Beauty includes hairdressers, beauty salons, nail salons and the like. And my intel has been that since this data was prepared a week or so ago, that those categories have gone very strongly positive. There was some pent-up demand, obviously, but there are still challenges associated with operating within those sectors, given close contact with clients. So what do you need to know in terms of where things are heading? Well, I've already touched on the fact that a lot of businesses have been told that their workers are to remain at home. And one of the reasons for that is that public transport is seen as being essentially unsafe once we get above about 15% capacity. People are undoubtedly moving around less, and particularly via public transport. What they are doing more, though, is they're moving around on foot and on bikes. So you need to be cognizant that that's how people are going to be getting to your stores. The ABS put out quite a useful survey last week asking what the impacts of COVID-19 had been on people's time use. And I thought some really interesting stats that came out of this, and the ones I've highlighted in red that have direct relevance for you and for people operating within Stonnington's precincts are people are spending a heck of a lot more time and money on looking after their house. So a range of household maintenance chores and also projects. There is no doubt, and it's borne out by these numbers, that people are cooking at home a lot more. I've already talked about the specialty food operators that are benefiting from that, but also homewares retailers. People are exercising more, and that's a real positive for people involved in the health and fitness sectors, and also on the clothing fronts as well. And people are spending a lot more time and money on hobbies. So we've seen the trends come through in the spending, and we're seeing that backed up now by this survey data from the ABS as well. The last point that I want to make, and I touched on this earlier, in terms of if you're not online, you're to a degree not in the game. One thing that the COVID crisis has done is that it's accelerated online spending in Australia by about 2 to 3 years. So it was ticking up by 1% every year. A year ago at this time, about 10% of our retail spending was online. Today, it's more like 14%. There was a spike when we thought we were to a degree more locked down than we are now, where it hit 20%. That's come back to what I think is going to be the new norm, which is 14%. So if you're not offering goods and services online, you're missing out on about 1/7 of the market, 14% of the market. And I think that's important for you to understand. So in terms of relaunching, what are my ideas? What are the themes? Well, the first thing, I love this chart, I want you to realise, is that markets are complex. Again, I'm an economist. I'm fascinated by markets. The music market is a market that has been in decline for many years. But it's a market that started to grow again, and it started to grow again for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons was the reintroduction of vinyl. So vinyl used to drive the industry back in the 70s and the 80s. And it's amazing how it's reappeared and is one of the components of the music market that is helping it to grow again. But markets are a heck of a lot more complex than they used to be. So if you look around about 2000, the only thing that drove spending on music was compact discs. Today, there are 5 different components that make up music. And again, if you think about your channels and you think about your customers, that's the type of view that you have to have. So what are some of my themes? I think that people are going to want to keep staying in their local bubble. And this concept of the local bubble is really important for you. It is something for you to seize upon. People are going to stay in their local bubble. They're going to work in their local bubble. Not as mobile. We're not going to be able to travel. And there's a real positive in there for everyone except those who are involved in the travel agency sector and in the tourism sector. 10 million Australians went overseas last year. So about 40% of Australians went overseas at least once last year and spent $60 billion on those trips. Now that's equivalent to 20% of our retail economy. That is money which is back in people's pockets to a degree and is now not being spent. That is money for you if you're in retail, non-travel related services in Stonnington to seize upon. Stonnington is an area that has generally wealthy residents and residents that are very mobile. You need to, you should be seizing upon that opportunity. The other thing to think about locally as well is looking for more family and children involvement in your businesses. Now, One of the local opportunities for Stonnington businesses as well, before I get to that point, is the fact that you have a lot of children in the area who are at private schools, and almost all private schools within the area are offering rebates to parents, and these are quite significant. I'm also aware of some private schools that have said there'll be no fee increases next year. So in terms of dollars in people's pockets, if they're keeping their jobs and they're content that they will have jobs going forward, again, there are opportunities for you to benefit from that. In terms of working in your local bubble, there is no doubt that there are many of us who are working at home in and around your precinct, and that will continue for some time. Because of the government directive, it was in the short term, and in the long term, there is absolutely no doubt that people will be spending more time working from home. This means that you've got opportunities to see more people throughout the day and week than you normally do. You might only see some of these customers when they run into your shop between sporting events on Saturday mornings, whereas suddenly they may now be spending 1 or 2 days a week at home, and you will see them throughout the day. So get to know them. I went into a cafe recently where, of course, I had to take down my name and address, and as I left, I was greeted with my name. Now, that's clever. They're not using my details inappropriately. The next time I went in there, they had remembered my name. I do go there from time to time, but they've used that opportunity to get to know me better. And these are the things that you should be doing as well. But in terms of families and children, I often get the impression that there are some people running businesses who treat our children as more of a nuisance than anything else. Well, I think attitudes to them need to change. You're going to see more family units on foot, for instance, together, shopping and visiting your stores together. And I think you need to think about how you're going to interact with them. Local faces are going to be valued. There's a theme here, and you'll see it on my last slide, which is following in terms of what I coin as local heroes. These are people who've kept employing people locally, who look after other local businesses, who look after local schools, do the right things. I think that you will be valued if you do that more than you ever have in the past. There's no doubt that people are very much focused on their own homes. That's been borne out by the ABS survey last week, and also by the amounts that people are spending at places like Bunnings, at Mitre 10, at Beacon Lighting, at Adairs and the like. If you're in those types of sectors, you should be benefiting from that. People, not everyone, but more people are staying fit and well. They're on foot. If you're offering goods and services in those sectors, you should be benefiting from that. Make sure, if you can, that people who are arriving on cycle, that the people who are walking are catered for. How do you cater for someone who's walking? We come back to the old issue of shopping bags and the like. I think people are getting a lot better now in terms of if they go out on foot, they'll take them with them. But recognise that more people are probably going to be wanting to take goods home in bags rather than just simply take them out to their cars. Where Stonnington can benefit is that people are going to be looking back to, and particularly given what's happened over the last week, to smaller crowds. And frankly, whilst Chadstone is within Stonnington, your challenge is to take on Chadstone to a degree. You have a distinct advantage over Chadstone. You have largely fresh air out on the streets. You're exposed to the elements. I'd be actually using that as an opportunity rather than seen as being a detriment to your business. Also recognise that people aren't going to be wanting to catch public transport, and to my way of thinking, that also helps you in terms of competing with the CBD. The CBD at the moment, frankly, is a ghost town. It has a terrible feel to it. Pedestrian numbers are still well down there. They're still less than half of what they were back in pre-COVID days. And a lot of that's because people aren't working in there, but also because they don't want to use public transport to get into the CBD. They don't want to use taxis. They don't want to use Uber. These are all the things that are encouraging people to stay local. So just finally, in terms of you're thinking about a campaign, for want of a better term, you should be very much fashioning or casting yourself as the local heroes. You should be making sure that you do genuinely love kids. They're good for your business today. They're good for your business in the future. And in terms of thinking about your business and your offer to your existing customers and potential future customers, you've got a physical presence that puts you close to your customers. You need to be online, and you need to be offering delivery or click and collect options to your customers. So as promised, that's got me through the presentation. I think I've had some questions popping up as I've been going through my presentation. So let me just go back to my main menu here, and I'll see if I can pick those up. Okay, let me just pick those up. All right, I was being told people were in the waiting room, which I've let some more people in. I can't at the moment see any other questions. So what I'm going to do is, I know I've asked you all to mute, but if anyone would like to jump in and ask me a question, please just introduce yourself, who your business is or what your business is, and I'll attempt to answer that. I'm getting resounding silence out there. Maybe Dalik or Jess, you've got something you wanted to throw in there from the city.
It was great to hear that you say that you think fashion is going to be potentially come back. Is there any indication of what sort of levels you think it might come back to, or how long duration might take?
Yeah, Dalik, good question. As I said before, I think fashion's probably the part of the retail industry which is going to require the most help. A lot of fashion retailers were already struggling, and I put that down to having to compete with what I call the foreign raiders. So these are the Uniqlos, the Zaras, the H&Ms of this world, which frankly had been offering goods at a price and a range which made it very, very difficult for smaller retailers to compete with. I see that continuing to a degree, but where I think people have got an opportunity to make a difference is by having something that they offer locally that is different, that is catered to the needs of their local people, and that is catered to the needs of the time. I'll give you an example. I went into a Country Road store recently to go and buy an old favourite pair of tracksuit pants from them just after they reopened. Gone. Gone within a day apparently, and could offer no indication as to when they would be back. That's the type of, for me, pretty basic 52-year-old bloke, good piece of fashion that people are looking to buy at the moment. So practical, comfortable. If you can offer that, and if you can offer that in a way that it's not just for dad, but dad comes in with his son or his daughter who wants something similar, then you're better placed. You stop people having to get in their car or on public transport and go and do that in the city or Chadstone as you would have in the past. The other thing, though, that I think will be a particular opportunity for Stonnington fashion businesses is the fact that you will have some local residents who've had significant travel refunds who won't be spending on going overseas now on their annual 3 or 4 week trip through Southern Europe or wherever, who won't be going skiing, who won't be going to Noosa in September. That realisation, I think, is dawning on everyone now, who've got lower school fees to pay this term. I think that there may well be, and I know it's difficult to contemplate this at times, but there may well be a bit of a splurge mentality with some customers, particularly those at the more wealthy end of the spectrum. And so I would be thinking about, and I know again this may seem counter to everything that's going on at the moment, but I'd be thinking about tailoring some packages to people who are actually looking to come out and spend significant amounts of money. You wouldn't have been seeing this in the past because a lot of those people would be doing that when they're overseas or doing that in Hastings Street in Noosa while they're away. Well, they don't have that ability. So if you're looking to tap into them, there's a pretty significant part of the market within Stonnington which is going to have those funds available.
Justin, has there been any indication about rental rates? Do you think that this may have been the push that may bring some, landlords into potentially looking at different rental rates, particularly with encouraging new business to come in to allow people to try out, maybe home-based businesses that want to move back into the sector onto the street, have sort of a hard top. Do you think that this will change that kind of landscape?
It should, Delete, but unfortunately, a lot of owners of strip-based shops are owners of 1 or 2 or 3 properties. They're not particularly sophisticated, and even the sophisticated owners, the owners of the large malls at the moment, frankly, are struggling. So how do I approach this? I approach this by looking at the owners of the large malls and what they're doing. Their worlds are very different today to what they were 6 months ago. Some of them have faced up to reality and have cut rental levels. But there are a number of the bigger ones, the centre groups and the vicinities who own Chadstone, who from all accounts aren't facing up to reality. Unfortunately, I think that sends a poor message to local landlords. Local landlords, at the end of the day, view the income from their tenancies as legitimate business income, as of course it is. But there are a number of them who, before this crisis started, had been sitting on vacant tenancies for some time. I would have thought that what's happened now would have changed their mindset, but at the moment, it's not in general what I'm hearing, which is unfortunate. There are few examples in the country of where owners of strip-based properties have got together and thought strategic about this. There is a good exception in Paddington in Sydney, and there was a story on this in the press a couple of days ago about an owner who's aggregated a number of properties in there, has a lot of Australian-based different businesses in there, and they are all prospering at the current time. And I think that's a great model. I know what Stonnington's trying to do and what the business associations are trying to do is to help steer things in that direction. But it does really require the landlords to play ball and And unfortunately, Deleke, I'm just not seeing that at the moment.
Thank you, Justin.
So someone's just put a question through for travel agencies at the moment. And again, I sympathise with you. Your world is exceptionally tough. And I think, unfortunately, things all changed again on Saturday. So any glimmer there was that Victorians would be able to travel domestically on any sort of scale changed, and even the messaging from New South Wales yesterday, which was pretty unfortunate, was pretty much not wanted in New South Wales. At the moment, in terms of what you've got to sell, you've got Victoria to sell, and I think that you have to get creative there. So things that people have been seeking out for years online themselves, Airbnbs and the like. I think what you won't realise is that people who have been doing those sorts of things are not necessarily the type of people that you would see in your travel agencies. They're people who are comfortable with taking a risk on booking a property, or perceived risk on booking a property through Airbnb and the like. So these are people that you want to get back in, who are your regular valued customers who value what you do for them. So you need to try to act as an intermediary, as a filter for them, and provide them a service where you're helping them out with those types of bookings. I think for good regular clients, they'll recognise that you need to make a living, you're providing a service, and you need to charge for the provision of that service. But as it stands at the moment, with things constantly changing, I think that is what you have to focus on. You have to focus on Victoria. And you should be focusing on things that people haven't. If you live in Melbourne, how many people have actually gone and stayed in a hotel in the CBD in the last 10 years? They may not have done that, but what you got to look to do to get them in there is you got to be able to package up something for them. So a night at the Western, dinner at Andrew McConnell's new restaurant that's just opened. They're the sorts of things that you need to be able to offer people, which aren't things that you would have traditionally have been doing in the past. That's what you're going to, I think, have to do to get through what I understand has been a really rough 3 or 4 months and is going to be for some time. I hope that's of some help. No worries.
If anybody else has got any questions, if not, we might wrap it up, Justin. Yes.
Happy to do so. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I know there are lots of these things going on at the moment. You need to allocate your time wisely. So thank you for joining us today, and all the best as local Stonnington businesses. Thank you.
A recording of this will be available on the website. We'll pop it up in the next few days for people. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.